Welcome to Let's Talk Security, where we spotlight cybersecurity companies and give an inside look at the people and technology behind the latest advancements in the industry. We discuss a wide range of topics with subject matter experts about today's cybersecurity challenges and how their solutions are helping organizations like yours maintain a continuous security posture. Please welcome the host of Let's Talk Security, Jeff Wolach.
Joining us today on Let's Talk Security is Chris Bates, Chief Information Security Officer at SentinelOne. Welcome, Chris, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invite. I'm really looking forward to the chat.
Chris, I'm going to start with some questions and just have a little back and forth between us. And we want to talk a little bit about SentinelOne, your role at SentinelOne, as well as how SentinelOne is working today and dealing with our new norm and helping companies address their work from home transitions. So if you won't mind, tell us a little bit about SentinelOne. Who is SentinelOne and your role as CISO over there?
Well, SentinelOne is one of the next-gen EPP EDR companies. We're founded in 2013, and we've been growing pretty much year over year by over 100%. Market's kind of consolidated down to really it's us, CrowdStrike, and Microsoft at this point. But we kind of pioneered the use of automated behavioral detection or automated EDR to kind of solve the antivirus and the advanced threat use case. So it really brought to the market and still what makes us very unique. My role as CISO at SentinelOne is I'm responsible for all company security. So securing the internal company, securing our SaaS offering, securing our product, and really kind of making sure that our risk mitigation is within our tolerance, which is very low. So we have thousands of companies that we protect. And so we are a target in a lot of areas. So my job is to pretty much protect the company across the board.
Interesting how, your job is to protect a company that makes security solutions, but that's great. I did notice also when I was doing my research, Chris, that you didn't start initially at SentinelOne as a CISO. You actually were one of the principal architects on the project before you were CISO. So tell us a little bit about your role as the principal architect and any other roles maybe you had prior to becoming the CISO.
Yeah, I mean, when I joined the company, it was much, much smaller. I think I was employee 80 when I joined the company 4+ years ago. So as a principal architect, I was really responsible for kind of the interface between the field at a technical level. So what did our customers say? What did our customers want? How was the product actually performing within the deployed base? And then kind of the R&D team who was designing the product. And so really kind of setting a lot of the strategy, a lot of the features, kind of really making it fit to the field is what I was doing. And I was, talking to most of our major customers during their POC buying process, after their buying process, all the way through renewals, things like that. So it was really more of a kind of that interface between those two and being able to convert customer needs and or wants and or problems into technical architecture, technical specs or things that the R&D team could then execute on. So that's what I was really doing as principal architect. After that role, I took over for a short time. I was vice president of strategy, security strategy. So really kind of more of a strategic role focused on overall security strategy in the product. And then I became CISO about a year ago. So
nice. Well, congratulations. So as CISO these days during a pandemic, what's concerning you the most when it comes to securing the work from home users that you have with SentinelOne? And how is that translating, out to your products for customers?
Yeah, so I think I guess we're a little bit lucky in that when we designed this company from the ground up, we designed it for remote use, right? Remote workforce. So most of the things we had kind of fit into that bucket. The main thing that we're seeing across the board, when you talk about work from home, is really it's about the change in visibility and enforcement points. So when you have everything funneling through your standard corporate infrastructure, you tend to have tools that will give you certain levels of visibility, like maybe firewalls and or cloud proxies, things like that. Most companies now, when they go from work from home, are using public SaaS applications. So a lot of times, endpoint from home, a person working from home in COVID may not even ever cross a corporate boundary. They may not need to VPN into work. They may not need to, use a zero trust to get to work. They're just going in hitting like maybe G Suite or O365 or some other SaaS app. So what that really does is kind of change how you get visibility and enforcement in the landscape. And unfortunately for us, we use SentinelOne, and SentinelOne gives us that visibility on or off the wire, no matter where you are, due to its autonomous nature and its data tracking capability, its EDR capability. We have that visibility and enforcement point where a lot of companies that are moving this route, are being forced to move to this route very quickly, do not have those capabilities, and they're quickly trying to catch up.
Right, and that just basically leads to the word perimeter, right? We know we used to be a perimeter, an area within the network that we were protecting, but now that perimeter is no more. I mean, the perimeter has gone away, not only because people are working from all over the world and all over in different places and outside of your network, but also the fact that, that perimeter is gone for years. So at SentinelOne, again, this is an endpoint level type of product. Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about how SentinelOne is securing the users from wherever they are. You were alluding to that a little bit ago, where you were saying, not necessarily is everybody connecting to a VPN these days. They're just going and using SaaS applications. And that's very risky, as we know.
It can be. I mean, if you really look at kind of the new paradigm, and I've been talking about this for a while, as some other people, is the new enforcement mechanism moving forward is really about endpoint, cloud, and brokering the identity between those two. Those are basically your three real enforcement points instead of firewalls, other types of things. So when you look at it, SentinelOne covers two of those. So we cover the endpoint, naturally, endpoints, PCs, Macs, Linux, things like that, with our EDR, standard EDR agent and our EPP agent. So we can be on there, we can protect it on or off wire, whether it's VPN in or not. Those work as well, even in limited connectivity and or areas where bandwidth is at a premium. The protection and visibility are still there, unlike some of our other competition. But what a lot of people don't know about SentinelOne is we also have products that protect cloud workloads in the cloud. We can deploy and protect Kubernetes workloads, containerized workloads. We have cloud security posture checking. Is the cloud configured correctly? Is it secure? So we protect kind of two ends of that spectrum, which is the cloud and the endpoint, which leaves basically the enforcement of the identity that binds those two together as kind of the area we don't touch. But that said, we can see it on both ends. So I think that's how SentinelOne really kind of helps enforce that, is it gives you visibility and enforcement protection, autonomous protection on two of the three new pillars of, we'll call the work from home or the SaaS age.
Okay. And, also the landscape has a little bit changed from the known viruses that we're used to with the antivirus, products that we would normally have installed on our endpoints. But that has kind of changed now to really the zero-day malware and ransomware. And so SentinelOne, from what I understand, addresses that correctly with the new types of attacks.
Yeah, I mean, zero-day is kind of it's an interesting concept. Really what zero-day is a delivery mechanism for a piece of malware. And if you look at how malware is delivered, that has changed a lot over time. And how it's obfuscated, right? So instead of a binary, maybe it's a script file, maybe it's an exploit, maybe it's a lot of other things. But when you really look at what the attack actually does, the behaviors of the attack, those are usually the same, whether it's a zero-day, a PowerShell script, or a binary, once it's on the system, it's trying to do the same type of things. It's trying to escalate privileges, establish persistence, do some type of recon. Maybe if it's a ransomware encrypted file system, those are pretty much standard behaviors, no matter how the malware is delivered. So what SentinelOne really pioneered, and this is what makes it so unique, and we will say immune to the delivery mechanism, is it has automated the behavioral analysis process using AI. So you can think of each SentinelOne agent as pretty much a level 1 SOC analyst that's observing the behaviors of everything on that box in real time. So no matter how a threat is introduced to the box, whether it comes from a phishing email or a Zeroday or a binary or someone plugs in a USB stick, it doesn't really matter because we're observing what is it actually doing. And we can tell when the threat becomes malicious in real time and kill it. So as long as the threat can't evade the visibility and or detect the monitoring engines we have, then sooner or later it will do something that is considered malicious, because that is its by default its definition or its purpose. Once it does that, we will convict it, we will kill it, and we'll automatically remediate that. And that happens without any cloud connectivity. It happens in pretty much real time. So that's why look at how SentinelOne has really solved and or for the most part completely changed how we deal with these things. It's that ability. That's how we can roll back ransomware. That's how we can stop ransomware. That's how we have never missed a ransomware attack, as an example, is because the behaviors are all the same. It's just how it's introduced. And I think a lot of the traditional endpoint companies, or the traditional ways, are basically trying to do ways to detect malware at introduction, which is good, but it's pretty much an infinite challenge. You will never be able to stop malware getting on a system. There's always a new hole. But when you talk about behaviors, it's definitely a much more confined and static problem, and that's what we solved. So,
okay, so basically, you're addressing the area, after the malware has been technically deployed onto a system, through then the execution or the kill chain, as they would call it, where it would basically start doing things, lateral movements, command and control, things of that nature.
Well, I would say even before that. We try to prevent what we can prevent, but ultimately, let's say we can't prevent it, and someone executes, a piece of malware by opening a file or doing something else, right? What will happen is when we start to see that, how did the malware spawn? Well, it spawned from an Excel document. Okay, that's kind of weird. Now it went to call PowerShell. That's really weird. Now it's trying to establish persistence and download something. That's malicious, and we kill it at that point based on the actions that it actually did up to that point. And so while we all admit that we want to prevent things and we try to prevent things, I think we all understand that not everything is preventable. So the backup has to be a really rock solid ability to detect and respond to things you can't prevent. And what makes SentinelOne very unique is that we have automated, using machine learning and at machine speed, that detection and response loop. Very
cool. So that leads us to, I guess, the question about the architecture of SentinelOne. What is that architecture, Chris, and what kind of sets it apart from other EDR vendors out there today?
Well, I think the main thing is the fact that we arm and or use this autonomous agent to apply machine learning at a behavior level. So I'll give you a couple examples that really kind of bring it out, and the difference between us and some of our competitors. So process A starts process B. That's really easy. Anyone can follow that. Process B then does something like calls RPC, then calls WMI to inject into process C, which has been running for hours before process A even started. That's what is considered a context evasion. So most EDR tools in the market today, now that starts looking like two separate attacks, and they're not linked together. And so what SentinelOne does is we've created a engine that relinks all of these types of context evasions into a single context. So you can't basically break the story. A bad guy can't evade the story or the person narrating it or scribing or writing the story. So if you can't evade that, that's number one. And then number two, using AI and machine learning to score that story as it emerges over time. What you really get is a very unique thing, right? So a lot of tools, number one, will send all this information or try to send this information to the cloud and have the cloud do all of the work on it. CrowdStrike's a good example of that. And so the issue with that is, like the context evasion case I talked about, it's impossible to send all the data you would need to solve all context evasions to the cloud. Just isn't enough bandwidth. But you can monitor them in real time on the box, which is what we do to relink everything. And then applying that to a story, if you can't break the context of a story, let's say for an example, SentinelOne misses, or EDR, any product misses step 1 or step 2 of the attack. When I detect that step 3, since it's one continuous story to me, the agent automatically knows what step 1 and 2 is, and it goes back and takes action on step 1 and 2. Even though it didn't alert on it, it saw it, it tracked it, it put it in context, and it can take action on that. And the biggest issue facing any SOC or any team right now is context, right? It's not information. People have tons of information. The issue is normally you have to have a human build that's contextual awareness of putting the data together in a way that can be understood. And the thing that SentinelOne really does is with its autonomous, we call it active EDR, is the agent actually builds that context for you. And it's highly, highly, highly accurate. So you can think of, as an example, let's say you had 1,000 SentinelOne agents out there. It's like you have 1,000 SOC analysts, one sitting on every endpoint, just focused on that endpoint. And then it's taking that data, using that in real time to prevent attacks, but then uploading that pre-processed work product of this autonomous analyst into a centralized console. So then the human powered analyst can start their processes 3 or 4 steps ahead of the curve.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes great sense, total sense. And so in that case, since all of that is being done at the endpoint, I mean, is it a regular update that gets pushed out to the endpoints to be able to address other levels of attacks, or is it more of a, like you say, machine learning, so it's just constantly looking at what's going on and learning on its own?
No, I think there's 2 things on that one. I mean, when you look at the idea of applying machine learning, right, really, machine learning models don't need to be updated as often as any other, like a signature. Like a signature is basically, I've observed something, and now I'm going to write something to go detect what I observed. Machine learning is much more around the idea of, here are the features that are most indicative of these types of attacks, or all types of attacks. And so when you think about behaviors, right, there's only about 400 or 500 behaviors that malware and or an attack will do on an endpoint. And those behaviors don't change. I mean, the times we actually find a net new behavior that has not been modeled and or predicted is exceedingly rare. There may be new ways that they use to spawn the behavior, but the end result of the behavior is the same. And so if you have a model that's based on these behaviors, right, it's pretty much future-proof to most of the new malware and most of the other things. And even if you go look at machine learning for prevention, like, the typical antivirus prevention mechanism, which is trying to detect if file is malicious or not, or predict whether it's malicious or not. Even a lot of those feature sets don't change a whole lot. So that's kind of one of the advantages of using machine learning is it's not brittle like your traditional signature-based system. So in our case, we release an agent every 6 weeks as part of our standard service pack, part of our new features. I mean, we're an agile shop. And if we do need to update a model, the model just comes with the agent release. But it's not very often we have to update the model.
Okay, got you. So you release every 6 weeks a new agent, and I'm assuming that can be automatically deployed out to the endpoint, or does that have to be manually deployed?
Yeah, it can be automated. It can be scheduled. It can be manually pushed. I mean, all that's done through the console. And it really kind of maps to however the end users really want to manage that solution. So, yep.
So what are some of the core features of the SentinelOne solution that, again, differentiates it from other EDR platforms out there?
So I think we have a couple. I think number one is this whole idea of that we talked about, this active EDR engine, which is, excuse me, that level one, that intelligent endpoint, which is building all the context and taking action in real time. That is something that is very unique to SentinelOne. Other endpoints, sorry, well, other companies will try to do that by maybe applying an IOA, which is kind of a very small point in time. I'm looking for process A starting process B, or process A doing something bad, and then they'll convict on that. But it doesn't have the overall context of everything else that happened before or after that. So it's a very finite point in time. So this idea of the active EDR engine tracking everything in a forensically sound manner in context is very unique to us. And that's what enables us to do the automatic remediation recovery. So some of our competitors tout automatic tout remediation, but it's a guy basically manually creating a script to go carve the malware out after it ran. So not only is that time consuming, but it's also susceptible to human error. Whereas in our case, we saw the file did 20, we saw the malware or the threat did 20 things. I can programmatically undo those 20 things and be done with it. So it's very much a force multiplier there. I think the second thing that's unique to us is we have this model deployed across all major operating systems. So same model, same type of model for Mac, Linux, Windows, and even cloud workloads. So as an example, we have our CWPP agent, which for Kubernetes, you can deploy in a daemon set, and then you can basically protect and get visibility and tracking into all of your containers as they come up and come down. And that's a very hard problem to solve right now. Is you have like Kubernetes that may have 10 machines, and then spin up 1,000 machines, and 1,000 machines only live for 5 minutes, and then they go away, and now they're back down to 200, and they spin up another workload which exists for maybe seconds to hours. How do you get the visibility and context in those workloads? Number one, to know if something went wrong, but number two, to know if it's being exploited by a bad actor. They're very hard problems to solve right now, and they're still like in the fairly nuanced stage or early stages of that. So being able to use SentinelOne to combine that information, the CWP information, with the endpoint information, with the other intelligence across your network is very, very critical. And then the final thing we have is, I think which is unique, is Ranger, which is this idea of you can't protect what you don't know about. So what we've done, unlike other companies, is we have basically taken each one of these autonomous sentinels, these agents on your network, and we have turned them into an intelligent scanning mesh. You can think of each one of them as also looking for things that are not managed by SentinelOne that are communicating on the network. So you have an IoT device, you have a printer device, you have a VM running on its machine, you have a container running on its machine. And trying to get this idea of everything that's running in your enterprise is very critical. And Ranger allows someone to do that in a very intelligent manner, number one. Then number two, it allows you to figure out what the risk is of that. So I have a coffee maker that I didn't know was running in the kitchen, and it has an unsecured SSH open to it, which is vulnerable. That's a perfect pivot point if someone got access to your network that you probably didn't know about. I have a machine running in R&D that has 15 VMs on it, and none of them are patched. That could be a critical vulnerability that any other EDR tool would be blind to, and any other tool would be blind to. So if you look at how CrowdStrike or Qualys or these other things do that, you're not going to see those VMs unless you're sitting on that machine with that type of scanner. And no one deploys those types of scanners on all machines. So that's another critical function that we have, which is core to SentinelOne. Then finally, we have the data lake, which is kind of what we call our Singularity data lake, which is basically all the data I've talked about that's been collected in context, uploaded into a centralized location that allows you to query and apply business logic to it. So you could go say, as an example, newest threat intelligence report comes out that says this piece of malware is targeting my environment. You could use a very quick pivot using our hunting tool to say, have I ever seen this piece of malware? Have I ever seen any of these IOCs in my environment? And if so, what is the root cause of each IOC? And that will actually return to you in seconds versus the hours it would take to do it normally. So it's kind of the idea of getting all of the data, but then actually putting the context on top of it so you can understand the data and take action on the data versus, a human having to go piece it all together.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. What was interesting when we were actually talking to SentinelOne and talking about representing SentinelOne and bringing SentinelOne into our portfolio, one of the features that was brought to our attention at the time was the rollback feature, which I believe you are the only ones today doing that. Is that still the case?
We're the only ones doing it as completely as we are. There's one other company that's using their own proprietary way to do it, but it's not, there's some issues with that. So rollback to us is just an extended capability where, as I said, the agent, that's SentinelOne, that's autonomous agent, knows, let's say you execute a file, it knows every file read and write that happened, every registry key that was deleted or added, but it also knows what was deleted. So like take the case of ransomware. And let's say we even by chance missed a ransomware. We have never done that, but even if we did miss a ransomware, the agent would know every file that was created, modified, and deleted. And more importantly, since it's using volume shadow copy service, which is an orchestrated Microsoft product, and protecting it, we can even recover, not that we've ever had it, for a rollback in the extreme case would allow you to even recover from a missed ransomware event or any type of missed event. So even if we missed something, rollback would allow an analyst to go convict whatever we missed when he found out, and then take action to automatically undo the damage. And we are still unique in the industry for that one.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Mitre, people are familiar with Mitre attack. That's kind of become the common language these days amongst EDR vendors and solutions, kind of almost a de facto standard on the way to evaluate the product's ability to be able to provide actionable information to the SOC. Can you share with us, I know that just recently this year, Mitre did a round 2 test. How did SentinelOne perform in that test?
So SentinelOne performed amazingly well in that test, to be honest. Number one, we had the least amount of misses. So if you look at the test and you look at kind of all the steps, I think it was 120 steps, if I remember right. And what they're looking for is, did you record, see, and or understand each part of the step? And I think we had by far the least amount of steps that we had no observation points on. And those are things like the ones that we missed would be, we didn't record someone typing in a command on the console, but we did record the output and or the system response to the command, right? So even though we missed the command or we didn't record the command, we now record commands, but even though we didn't, we saw the execution and we took action on what actually happened based on that. So we had the least amount of misses. We had the most in context. So again, if you look at Mitre, one of the reasons Mitre is really, really taking off is it provides a real, I want to say almost a common vocabulary, not only for EDR tools and endpoint tools, but also other security tools, right? So it's really kind of this common vocabulary around context. So I don't need to necessarily understand at the very, very technical level, WMI persistence, right? And how you do it. If I know that this is the Mitre TTP X, Y, and Z, then I can just look for that. If my tool supports it, I can just look for that TTP versus having to know how to hunt for WMI persistence as an example. So it really becomes this common language. And so in the SentinelOne response, we absolutely had the most what we call high quality detection. So we mapped the most behaviors in the Mitre attack to specific Mitre TTP, saying, yes, this is persistence via PowerShell, or no, this is privilege escalation. This is, TT, TT, 1535. So I think that was very, very interesting in that response. And then finally, I think we have vigilance, which is an MDR offering. Again, the system itself is mainly autonomous and it works autonomously, but some people like to have eyes on the console 24/7, 365, and maybe they don't have the ability to staff that. So they can subscribe to the vigilance service, which is basically becomes an outsourcing of their SOC. It's much like CrowdStrike's Overwatch program would be an example. In this case, the SentinelOne Vigilance program correctly identified, triaged, and flagged all of the activity. I think 119. It's like 98 or 99% of the activity within 20 minutes. Where if you look at the other competing NBR services, the highest score of any other NBR service was around 20 to 30% of the activity.
Interesting. And that leads me to the question, because we're all familiar with the SIM products, the SIM technology out there. The SIM seems to kind of be going away, or maybe it's not giving as much information as, let's say, an MDR type of environment. Is that the case?
Well, I think SIM has two very unique use cases. One is, of course, regulatory, but my personal opinion is one of the flaws with SIM from a security operations space is it's collecting a ton of data, but it requires humans to kind of combine that data into any type of actual thing. So basically, if you look at SIM and you look at the rules, for the most part, they're just like signatures. There is some type of human interface writing a signature to say A, B, and C equals X, as an example. And then it's only as good, that signature is only as good as the people writing it. Some people may be really good, some people won't. But what most people notice in SIM space is the sheer amount of noise and upkeep of trying to keep these rules in any type of actual order really outweighs the usefulness of a SIM from a detection standpoint. Because you're spending so much time on false positives, triage, data things. It's not worth it. I think what you're seeing in the market space more now is you're seeing NDR and or MSPs, which is, here, give us your SIM, and we've got the really smart data science engineers who can write the rules better than probably the people you can hire. That's one way. But I think what you're also going to see coming out is Gartner has a idea of this XDR, which is SentinelOne is definitely moving into the XDR space. And what that is not ingesting all of the data, but it's ingesting high quality data streams where you don't have coverage with your EDR tool, but then using those data streams to increase detection rates and or provide additional context to what the EDR is seeing and or doing, right? An example would be like Okta or, identity streams, other types of streams. So I think XDR is really kind of, to me, it's like a SIM 3.0 type use case. I would look for, Gartner and other ones are really starting to push that. Like Forrester, the Forrester's no longer publishing a EDR wave. The next wave will be an XDR wave. So I think what you're seeing is the SIM kind of moving into the next generation of what it needs to be.
And XDR, an XDR, from what I'm familiar with about XDR, is really just enhancing, like you say, the data coming off of the endpoint with other data that you might gather through your network, whether it's your firewalls or something of that nature, correct?
Firewalls, I think they're also looking at getting other, like, your data streams, AD and or Okta, right? So you can take your network and your endpoint and look at, as an example, okay, I know Bob's been compromised. Bob is, Bob and Okta, but Bob is also Tom and Bob 1 and Bob 2 and Bob 3 in Okta. let's go look at how those user accounts being used at the same time this other compromised account is being used, and if so, what do those look like, would be an example. I think CASB and some of the cloud, I think you're going to see some of those also be ingested in. But yeah, it's a subset. It's not like saying where it's like, give me all of your logs and let me archive them for, regulatory purposes and then try to bind those together. It's much more of a starting and looking at what data makes sense to ingest from a detection and response capability versus a archival and or regulatory capability.
Great. Yeah, no, I mean, alert fatigue is definitely something that companies are challenged with every day, especially SOCs. How about the SOAR world? Do you guys integrate today with SOAR products?
We do. We integrate with the main ones, Demisto, Swimlane, Phantom. Although Demisto, I forget, I think it's been rebranded since Palo bought it. But yeah, we integrate with SOAR. And I think SOAR is a very interesting use case because if you look at again, going back to I think you have SOAR. SOAR is kind of interesting in that I don't think it's got the adoption that it should have gotten, mainly because it still requires a lot of times you to have staff to kind of maintain the logic and or the integrations between these tools. But I do think having some type of automated response, it is actually a critical capability Gartner is adding to even XDR, which is, not only do you have to be able to take data from other systems to include your detection, improve your detection, your response aspects need to be automated and take actions in other systems besides what your traditional EDR system is. Because again, it's all about, if you look at if you really look at the two metrics that really matter in a detection and response, or an EDR or even in a SOC, it really comes down to how long did it take me to detect. How long was the person on my network before I detected them, number one, or how long has malware been there? And number two, how long between when I detected it can I contain it? And ultimately, you want those times to be getting as short as possible, right? And that's how you have a good SOC or good information security program when you're measuring those times and they continually get shorter and shorter and shorter. Your goal is to get them as close to real time as possible. And so I think SOAR and or when SOAR gets absorbed in XDR, I think those will be critical capabilities that you have to have.
Excellent. Well, Chris, I think our time is coming near to the end. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. I appreciate, you taking time and speaking with us and the audience. So if there's anything else you'd like to add to our conversation, please feel free.
No, I mean, I just thank you for the time. I really enjoyed the chat. I would ask if anyone is, interested in what they heard, to take a look at SentinelOne. Will
do. All right. Thanks again. And it was a pleasure meeting with you, Chris. Take care.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Check out our YouTube channel for previous Let's Talk Security broadcasts. Just go to youtube.com and search for Sinnott Wolach Technology Group. This episode is sponsored by SentinelOne, the only cybersecurity platform purpose-built for the remote workforce, and produced by Events by Drew Productions. Let's Talk Security is brought to you by Sinnott Wolach Technology Group, a leading provider of next-generation network and information security solutions and services.